My name is Camille Torres. I'm 31 years old, and tonight I'm walking straight into a storm I left behind 6 years ago. The occasion? My brother Julian's engagement dinner. A carefully curated event at Eucalyptus House, one of the most sought after dining experiences in all of San Francisco. The kind of place my family loves. Elegant, exclusive, and expensive enough to make a statement. They don't know the statement is mine. I smooth the fabric of my emerald green dress as I stand in the reflection of the glass doors. It's a dress I designed myself, simple but tailored, paired with a pair of low heels that wouldn't pass my mother's approval radar. I tuck a strand of hair behind my ear and take a breath. Tonight isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming the space I once shrunk to fit in. And maybe, just maybe, about finally ending the narrative they wrote for me without my consent. As I step into the softly lit lobby, I'm immediately greeted by the scent of eucalyptus and cedar. Signature notes we pipe in subtly to complement the earth tones of the space. My staff glances up. Recognition flashes in their eyes, followed quickly by silent understanding. I give a small nod. Not yet. This entrance isn't for the founder tonight. It's for the forgotten daughter returning to the spotlight of family scrutiny. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to walk back into a room where everyone doubted you, hit that like and subscribe. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this night ends. Because tonight, the people who once called me a failure are about to dine under my roof, at my table, eating food I designed down to the final garnish. And they have no idea. Shall we begin? Growing up in Pacific Heights, life in the Torres household looked perfect from the outside. My parents, Elena and Marco Torres, were fixtures in San Francisco's legal elite. My father ran a high-profile firm that specialized in corporate mergers. My mother chaired 3 different philanthropic boards and took pride in curating the perfect image. Well-dressed children, polished manners, spotless reputations. Julian was the blueprint. Straight A's, varsity athlete, early admission to Stanford Law. At every fundraiser and cocktail party, he was the star. And then there was me, the second child, the odd one. While Julian dazzled with courtroom simulations and future Harvard plans, I was outside in the backyard building forts out of reclaimed wood. At 6, I asked for a toolbox instead of a dollhouse. By 10, I was sketching layouts for tree houses with solar panels and rainwater systems. I didn't know the word sustainable yet, I just knew it felt right. My mother didn't. She'd walk into my room and frown at the scattered sketches and scraps of fabric. This is chaos, Camille. You need focus, discipline. Girls don't grow up to build things. They belong in things that have already been built. My father was worse. Architecture is fine for a side interest, but don't embarrass the family name with dreams that don't pay. When I got into UC Berkeley's College of Environmental Design, I was thrilled. My father barely looked up from his newspaper. You had the grades for Columbia, Camille. Why waste your potential on this? Even when I tried to align my passion with their expectations, interning at traditional architecture firms, dressing the part in stiff suits, they always found something to pick apart. Julian's wins were celebrated. Mine were tolerated. And slowly, I began shrinking myself to fit their vision, until I couldn't anymore. During my 3rd year of grad school, I received a fellowship opportunity to study under world-renowned eco-architects in Patagonia. It was the kind of chance people dream of. I told my parents, hopeful. My mother barely reacted. My father laughed. Let me know when you've grown out of this tree hugger phase. That night, something inside me snapped. I packed my bags. I left home. I left the expectations. I left behind their version of who I was supposed to be. And I didn't look back. Not until tonight. 6 years later, I'm walking into a room filled with the same judgmental faces, but this time I'm not the naive girl trying to fit in. I'm the woman who built her own world, and they're about to walk through it blindfolded. The last conversation I had with my parents before leaving home still echoes in my memory like a bruise that never faded. I've accepted the fellowship, I told them, standing in our marble-tiled kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter like a lifeline. My mother didn't even pause as she adjusted the fresh peonies in the vase. "You're throwing away your degree to go play architect in the jungle?" "It's Patagonia," I said quietly. "I'll be working with leaders in sustainable urban design. This is everything I've worked for." "You've worked for disappointment," my father snapped, finally setting down his glass of Bordeaux. "We gave you every opportunity, private schools, mentors, connections, and you spit on it all for what? Compost toilets and recycled wood?" That night, I walked out with nothing but a duffel bag, my sketchbooks, and a bank account that barely held enough for 1 month's rent. They cut me off financially within the week. No tuition help, no insurance, not even a response to my email asking for medical records when I needed them. For the first year, I lived in a rented room above a bike shop in Oakland. My landlord was a retired stonemason who let me pay part of the rent by helping renovate his kitchen. I worked construction crews during the day. Roofing, drywall, landscaping. At night, I took online courses to supplement the field experience. On weekends, I volunteered with urban farming projects and sustainable build collectives, just to stay connected with the vision I believed in. It was brutal. My hands were blistered, my back ached every night. I had no safety net and no backup plan. But I never once wanted to quit. That's how I met Naomi Wong. She'd come to one of the build sites on a Saturday, watching quietly as I led a team building a vertical garden wall out of reclaimed steel and recycled glass. Afterward, she approached me. "You're not just building," she said. "You're telling a story with space. Ever thought of designing something bigger?" I thought she meant a building. I didn't realize she meant a dream. Within 6 months, we partnered on the blueprint for Eucalyptus House, a space that would challenge the idea of luxury by fusing sustainability with design elegance. It would be part restaurant, part boutique lodging, part sanctuary. We built everything from the ground up. The walls were constructed from hempcrete. Solar panels powered the kitchen. Even the upholstery was made from seaweed-based leather alternatives. Every fork, every tile, every custom light fixture, I touched all of it. I designed all of it. We launched with quiet confidence. No marketing campaign, just word-of-mouth, curated private tastings, and intentional storytelling. And the city took notice. First came the whispers, then the influencers, then the press. 2 years later, Eucalyptus House is fully booked months in advance, praised by sustainability experts, travel critics, and celebrity chefs. But not once did I reach out to my family to tell them, because I wanted to build something for myself, not for their approval, not for their applause, but for the girl they dismissed, who was worth believing in all along. And now, tonight, they're dining at the table she built. Unaware, arrogant, still convinced I'm the one who failed. But they have no idea just how close they are to the truth, and they're about to choke on it. The moment I stepped into the dining room, I could feel the tension humming beneath the clinking glasses and curated laughter. The space looks stunning, if I do say so myself. Soft pendant lights cast a golden glow over reclaimed wood tables. Vertical herb gardens framed the walls in lush green, and hand-thrown ceramic plates added a quiet texture of artistry to every place setting. It was exactly as I designed it to feel. Organic elegance. Intimate. Unapologetically grounded. But tonight, none of that calmed me. I spotted them immediately at the center table. Of course, they'd request the center. Visible, prominent, impossible to ignore. My father, in his signature navy suit, was scanning the wine list like it was a contract. My mother wore pearls, real ones, over a pristine cream blouse and looked like she hadn't aged a day, just stiffened further. Julian sat beside her, polished and relaxed, with one arm casually draped behind his fiancée Bianca, who radiated the smug satisfaction of a woman who knew she was marrying well. I felt suddenly transported back to every dinner we'd ever had together. Me, seated just slightly out of the spotlight, trying not to say the wrong thing. But this time I wasn't here to impress anyone. Celeste, our lead hostess, approached me with a knowing smile and just the faintest nod. "Your party is waiting, Ms. Torres," she said, catching herself before saying anything more. "Thank you, Celeste," I replied. "I'll take it from here. As I approached the table, my mother looked up first, performing the same head-to-toe scan she used to assess whether my outfit met her silent, impossible standards. "Camille," she said, rising just enough to air kiss me. "You look comfortable," which, in mother language, meant underdressed. I smiled. "Nice to see you too, Mom." My father stood with a stiff, formal hug. "You look healthy," he offered. Code for not thin enough. Julian stood and pulled me into a half hug that barely touched. "Cam," he said with practiced warmth. "Glad you made it." Bianca didn't stand. She offered a tight smile and extended her hand like we were meeting at a boardroom. "Bianca Sterling," she said. "Julian's fiancée." "Camille Torres," I replied, shaking her hand. "Julian's sister. Former disappointment and current dinner guest." There was an awkward pause. Julian cleared his throat. "We've already ordered champagne," my mother announced. "I hope that's acceptable." "Of course," I said. "It's an excellent list." I didn't say I built that list myself, sourcing every label with intention. The waiter arrived just then with the bottle, and I recognized the exact pour. A biodynamic vintage from Napa I'd added after visiting the winemaker myself. He gave me a barely there glance of recognition. I responded with the slightest nod. "To the future, Mr. and Mrs. Torres Sterling," my father toasted, raising his glass. We all clinked. I took a sip. The champagne was perfect, served at exactly 47 degrees. And then the questions began. "So," my mother said, tilting her head, "tell us, what have you been doing all these years?" The table quieted. Even Bianca's glass paused midair. I smiled gently. "Still working in design." Julian raised a brow. "You mean architecture?" "In a way," I said. "I've been building." Bianca leaned in. "Building what exactly? Houses or furniture?" I laughed under my breath. "Something like that." "Well," my mother said, resting her manicured hand over her napkin. "Whatever it is, I'm glad to see you're at least managing. I always worried this environmental phase of yours wouldn't be sustainable. Pardon the pun." That word, phase. They'd used it so often it had become background noise. Our server, Mateo, arrived with the amuse-bouche, roasted beet foam over a sourdough cracker, topped with edible blossoms. He explained the course smoothly, placing each piece with care. My mother blinked at hers. "Is this it?" she whispered. "It's an amuse-bouche," I said, smiling. "Just the beginning." Julian tasted his and nodded. "Interesting." Bianca didn't touch hers. "I don't eat foam," she announced. I watched Mateo's jaw clench ever so slightly before retreating. The staff here prided themselves on every detail. Bianca's flippancy wasn't just rude, it was insulting. The first course arrived, a wild mushroom carpaccio with truffle shavings and microgreens. The presentation was stunning, and I caught my father inspecting the plate like it was a courtroom exhibit. My mother leaned in and whispered behind her menu. "These portion sizes are artistic." Julian chuckled. "Cam, I hope you ate before this." I cut a piece of mushroom and placed it delicately on my tongue, savoring the layers of flavor I had spent months perfecting with the kitchen. They didn't know yet. They didn't know whose food they were dissecting with smug expressions and soft jabs. But they would. Soon. The mushroom carpaccio was being cleared just as the second course arrived. Charred broccolini with lemon zest, aioli, and crushed macadamia, plated over a ceramic dish I had personally designed. My mother gave it a cursory glance before pushing it to the side. "I suppose this is the vegetarian course?" she asked, unimpressed. "It's a signature," I replied evenly. "Locally sourced." Bianca leaned toward Julian and whispered something behind her napkin. They both laughed quietly. I watched as my father took a bite, chewed, and shrugged. "Better than I expected," he said. "Although honestly, Cam, I would have thought by now you'd come back to something more stable, a real job, something with benefits. My grip on my fork tightened. I do just fine, I said simply. Julian smirked. Still doing that off-grid design thing? Tiny houses in the woods? Not exactly. Well, my mother interjected, it's admirable, I suppose, that you're surviving. And you look well, though you must be very careful about your finances. I didn't respond. Julian picked up his wine glass. To Camille, doing her best, against the odds. That one stung more than it should have. I turned my attention to the room. The soft hum of conversations, the synchronized rhythm of my servers, the ambient lighting that warmed every corner. My sanctuary, my design, my vision come to life. Bianca stirred her water with a straw she'd requested, even though we didn't offer single-use plastics. You know, she said suddenly, this place is beautiful. It reminds me of a wellness retreat I stayed at last year in Big Sur. Very curated. It's an intentional design, I said. Do you know the owners? She asked. It must have cost a fortune to book a table here. Julian nodded. Yeah. How did you get a reservation? I've heard there's a wait list months out. I smiled. Let's just say I know someone. My mother narrowed her eyes. Are you dating someone who works here? Julian chuckled. A chef, maybe? Or the event coordinator? Bianca gasped softly. Camille, is that how you got this table? I blinked. That's not how I got it. Bianca looked around theatrically. Well, whoever he is, thank him for us. This place is incredible. Our third course arrived, duck confit over parsnip puree with pomegranate glaze. A dish that had taken me nearly 6 weeks to perfect. The kitchen sent it out flawlessly. My father carved into his duck with his usual scrutiny. Decent, he said after a pause. Could be warmer. Bianca pushed her duck aside and whispered, I don't eat meat that still bleeds. It was medium rare. Exactly how it should be. Julian looked up. Camille, you're very quiet. Aren't you impressed? You finally made it to a table like this. I let out a soft laugh. More than you know. It was then the fourth course arrived. A palate cleanser of elderflower granita with candied ginger. Light. Bright. Meant to signal the transition to the final act of the meal. The server gently placed mine before me and gave a small, respectful nod. I caught the look in her eyes. She knew. They all did. Bianca toyed with hers but didn't taste it. I still don't understand how you can afford this place, she said bluntly. No offense, Cam, but design work isn't exactly lucrative, especially the eco kind. Julian leaned forward, grinning. Unless you married a tech billionaire in secret, I think we all want to know the truth. Come on, Bianca added, laughing lightly. We're family. What's the story? I paused. Around us, the energy of the restaurant moved with practiced grace, but at our table, the tension spiked like heat under glass. I manage my finances well, I said coolly. Right, Bianca replied, skeptical. You're still living in that co-op in Berkeley? I haven't lived there in years. Then how? She started, but Julian cut in. Guys, come on. This isn't an interrogation. But it was. It always had been. I could feel the old patterns snapping back into place, me defending myself, them circling like well-dressed sharks. Except this time, I wasn't the same girl. I wasn't here seeking acceptance. I was here because they had walked into my world thinking I didn't belong in theirs. And soon I would show them just how wrong they were. By the time the fifth course arrived, a hand-rolled sage and squash ravioli with brown butter foam, the air around our table had thinned into something taut and brittle. I could feel the staff watching from the periphery. Subtle glances exchanged, everyone waiting. Julian pushed the ravioli around with his fork. Honestly, I still don't get this whole minimalist food trend. 2 bites on a plate doesn't make it gourmet. I didn't answer. I just took a slow bite of the pasta I had helped conceptualize with Chef Wren, letting the rich flavors settle on my tongue. Bianca set her fork down sharply. Camille, I hope you know we weren't judging you. We're just curious. This place is clearly top tier. If you're not dating someone who works here and you're not a client, how did you even get the table? The concierge at Julian's firm had to pull some serious strings just to get a reservation. I looked up from my plate. Did they? I asked, feigning surprise. Julian laughed. You know how it is. Prestige opens doors. My mother dabbed her lips with her napkin. It's a lovely venue, but I still think fine dining should offer value. When I was young, you'd leave a restaurant full, not wondering if you needed to stop at a cafe afterward. People pay for more than food now, I replied calmly. They pay for experience, story, intention. Julian raised a brow. And I assume you've had enough exposure to those things through… What exactly? My father sipped his wine. Camille, seriously, how are you affording this dinner? Before I could answer, the maitre d', Louise, approached the table with the check discreetly tucked in a leather folder. He set it down between Julian and Bianca, offering a warm, professional smile. Julian reached for it, but Bianca beat him to it. She opened the folder and froze. For a second, no one spoke. Then she looked up. There's a mistake. It only lists the wine and aperitifs, none of the food. Julian took the folder from her, scanned the bill, and frowned. Yeah, this isn't right. My father flagged Luis with a flick of his fingers. Excuse me, there's a clear error here. Luis, ever composed, glanced at me first. I gave him a subtle nod. There's no error, sir, he said, turning back to my father. The meal portion of your dinner has already been taken care of. My mother straightened in her seat. By whom? Luis smiled gently and then looked at me. By Miss Torres. The silence that followed was sharp enough to split stone. My father blinked. Camille paid for the dinner? No, Luis said, stepping aside slightly. Miss Camille Torres is the executive director and founder of Eucalyptus House. Tonight's meal was her invitation. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin on the table with deliberate grace. I thought it was time, I said softly, for you to taste what you've spent years doubting. Bianca's mouth parted, but no sound came out. Julian's eyes flicked from me to the space around him, as if seeing the room for the first time. My mother's expression collapsed inward. You're the owner? I built it, I said. Every wall, every plate, every menu, from nothing. While you all assumed I was just drifting through failure. But you said, Julian began. I said I worked in design, and I do. This is design, this is architecture, this is vision. My father looked like he was trying to process a foreign language. But the investment? The capital? This place had to cost millions. 4.2 million to be exact, I replied, seated by investors who believed in me, now profitable and expanding. Bianca's face paled. So, besides, you knew the whole time? That we didn't know? And you just let us say all those things? I looked at her calmly. Yes, I needed to see what had really changed. Turns out, not much. Louise stepped back quietly, letting the table digest what had just unfolded. My mother placed her hands in her lap, trying to recompose herself. Camille, why wouldn't you tell us? Why hide this from your family? Because I wanted to build something that was mine, not something you could claim credit for. And because I needed to know if your support was conditional on success. Julian finally spoke again, his voice lower this time. You're really behind all this? The space, the food, everything? I nodded. And you let us critique it to your face? He asked, his voice a mixture of admiration and humiliation. I folded my arms. I've spent years listening to your critiques. Tonight wasn't any different. Except this time, I knew they meant nothing. My eyes swept the table. The empty plates, the uneaten ravioli, the untouched amuse-bouche still sitting in front of Bianca, like an afterthought. Enjoy dessert, I said, stepping back from the table. The lemon verbena tart is one of my favorites. I created it in a motel kitchenette the first year I left home. And with that, I turned toward the kitchen. The people who once called me lost were now sitting inside the world I built from their rejection. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. I hadn't even reached the kitchen door before I heard my name. Camille, wait, my father called out, his voice breaking through the stunned silence behind me. I turned slowly. They were all standing now, gathered near the edge of the table like a cluster of porcelain figurines that had just been tipped off a shelf. My mother stepped forward, her usual poise cracking around the edges. You should have told us, she said, almost breathless. We could have supported you, helped in some way. You did help, I said, not unkindly. Just not the way you think. You helped me understand exactly what I didn't want to become. Julian approached, hands in his pockets, brow furrowed like he was trying to solve a math problem. This whole time I thought you were barely scraping by. And here you are building something people actually talk about. Eucalyptus House has a waiting list 6 months long. I know, I said. Bianca folded her arms. You let us sit there, mocking everything, from the food to the space, and you just watched? I nodded. Because I needed to know how you'd treat me when you thought I was beneath you. My mother pressed her hands together tightly. You don't understand, Camille. We were concerned. We didn't want to see you throw away a promising future. No, I said evenly. You didn't want to see me choose a future you couldn't control. A beat of silence passed. Then softly, Julian spoke again. Is this why you invited us here? To prove a point? I considered that. No, I said. I didn't invite you. Bianca, or rather the concierge at Julian's firm, did. It was a coincidence. But when I saw the reservation come through, I decided to let it happen. I didn't plan to reveal myself tonight, but then you gave me no choice. Bianca looked like she might speak, then changed her mind. I just thought you were still finding yourself, she murmured. I did, I said quietly. Right here. Between every nail, every design line, every shift in the kitchen, I found the version of me that didn't need your permission to exist. Julian glanced back at the table. You built this without any of us even knowing. That's wild. That's deliberate, I replied. I built it out of survival, and now I run it from strength. My father, still trying to maintain authority, cleared his throat. Well, clearly you've proven you have business sense. If you're considering a second location, we might be able to connect you with partners. I'm not interested in business deals born out of guilt or surprise, I said firmly. My vision doesn't require family endorsements anymore. Bianca blinked hard. But don't you want a relationship with us? I hesitated. Then I looked around, at the dimming golden lights, at the staff moving seamlessly in the background, at the table of 7 that had become the stage for this unexpected reckoning. I want a relationship built on mutual respect, I said, not one where I have to earn my way back in. Julian stepped forward, his expression softening. Cam, I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I think this place is amazing. What you've done here, it's more than impressive. I gave him a small nod. Thank you. My mother clasped her pearls, her default move when her world tilted. You're really not going to join us for dessert? She asked, as if the evening might be salvaged with creme brulee. I can't, I said. I have a meeting. Real investors, not family trying to buy back relevance. Just then, Miranda, my executive sous chef, poked her head from the kitchen. Chef, she said, the McAllister group is ready. They're in the conservatory. Also, Anton just finalized the menu draft for the Tokyo project. I turned back to my family. Excuse me, my real priorities are waiting. Camille, Julian began. I looked at him. I'll be at your wedding, I said. Not because I forgive everything, but because you're my brother. And I want to believe we can move forward, just not under the same rules as before. He nodded slowly. Bianca, for once, looked humbled. You'd still come? Yes. But if you want the rehearsal dinner hosted here, I expect you to speak to my events coordinator, like everyone else. They all looked stunned. Then, surprisingly, my mother smiled. Just faintly. But for once, not as a performance. Understood. I nodded once, then turned back toward the kitchen. The door swung shut behind me with a soft whoosh, sealing them on one side, and my future on the other. I didn't need to look back. Because for the first time in my life, the only thing that mattered was what I saw ahead. The conservatory was bathed in the last rays of golden light as I stepped through the doorway. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the city skyline, softened by cascading greenery and the flicker of candlelight on each table. The McAllister group was already seated, sipping wine, reviewing mock-ups for the Tokyo expansion. I took a deep breath. This was the air I breathed now. Vision, strategy, creation. Not the approval of people who had once mistaken my passion for rebellion. Chef, Miranda greeted as she handed me the finalized tasting menu. We added the heirloom seaweed broth to the starters per your notes, and Zoe says she's nearly finished plating the amuse-bouche. Zoe, my youngest apprentice, 17, fierce, quiet, and brilliant. Perfect, I said, glancing at the handwritten notes. Tell her I want her to shadow plating for the McAllisters tonight. It's time. Yes, chef. As Miranda disappeared into the kitchen, I turned briefly toward the glass, catching a reflection I barely recognized. Strong posture, clear eyes, no more shrinking, no more waiting to be seen. A vibration in my pocket broke the moment. A message from Julian. Bianca says thank you for the dinner. She wants to apologize again. In person. You were right, we didn't know who you were, but we're starting to see now. I stared at the words for a long beat, then typed simply, appreciated. Let's take it one step at a time. After the investors left that evening, I returned to my table by the fireplace. The restaurant was quiet now. Candles flickered low. Jessica and Luis were finishing up the register logs, and someone had started a playlist of soft jazz in the background. My journal lay open, where I'd been working on the final page of my cookbook's introduction. I picked up the pen and began to write. This isn't a story about food alone. It's about building something when no one else believes in you. About holding the line when you're told your dream is too small, too soft, too strange. Every dish in this book carries a memory. Every step was taken with blistered feet and a spine forged from rejection. And through it all, I learned that the most nourishing meal you'll ever create is one rooted in your own truth. To anyone who's ever been laughed at, dismissed, or told to be realistic, this is your invitation. I closed the notebook slowly, a quiet satisfaction blooming in my chest. Outside, the city glowed under a navy sky. Somewhere in the distance, I imagined my family returning home, still reeling, still rewriting the story they'd told themselves about me. But I wasn't waiting on their rewrite anymore. The next morning, I met my mother for coffee. Not at a country club or a boutique cafe, but at a sunlit corner spot run by two sisters I used to wash dishes for in my first year of exile. My mother wore pearls still, but this time she looked unsure. Less sculpted, more human. She asked questions, real ones, about Zoe, about my future projects, about the choices I made. Not to change me, to understand me. And that was enough for now. Later that week, Ethan, my cousin, sent me a message asking if his daughter could shadow me for her high school senior project on sustainable design. I said yes. And the week after that, my father forwarded me an article titled The Power of Female Founders in Culinary Innovation. No note, just the link. But I smiled anyway, because healing doesn't arrive in grand gestures. It slips in through cracks left by softened judgment and tentative curiosity. It was happening slowly, but it was real. At the end of that month, we hosted a private charity gala at Eucalyptus House. My family attended, not as owners, not as critics, but as guests. They sat at table 6. I was at the chef's table, in my whites, confident, focused. When the servers brought out the third course, I watched as my father took a bite of the roasted fennel and sea urchin risotto, then nodded once without comment. It was the highest compliment he had ever given me, and I didn't need it, because I already knew. I had won. Not their approval. Something better. My own.